A warning about evangelical extremism. 13 years ago, I had a conversation that rattled me to my core. It permanently changed how I view evangelical Christian extremism, particularly as it connects with power, military structures, and the threat of nuclear annihilation. I was speaking with a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, an evangelical Christian, about the prospect of rebuilding the Third Temple in Jerusalem. I asked a simple but chillingly relevant question. Are you concerned about what might happen if people tried to raise the Dome of the Rock to build the temple? Her response made my blood run cold. If dropping a nuclear bomb on the Dome of the Rock was the only way to get it done, so be it. What would come afterward would be so much better than the world we live in now. That wasn't a theoretical answer. It wasn't an abstract theological statement. It was an expression of belief from someone who had command authority in the U.S. military, someone who had been entrusted with real-world power, speaking casually about the nuclear eradication of one of Islam's holiest sites, as if the death of millions were a price worth paying for prophecy. How many more people in our government, military, or intelligence agencies harbor similar views? How far down the nuclear chain of command do you have to go before you find someone who would say no to an apocalyptic order? 1, 2, 10? This isn't paranoia. This is historical realism. This is a recognition of how ideology, especially apocalyptic, death-glorifying ideology, can infiltrate institutions of hard power. Evangelical Zionism has already injected itself deeply into U.S. foreign policy. Leaders like John Hagee fund illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank forward Al Jazeera, advocate for war with Iran, and spread the belief that we must aid in the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, including the destruction of the Dome of the Rock and the building of the Third Temple. Their goal isn't peace. It's not even justice. It's Armageddon. Evangelical efforts to breed a red heifer, necessary for temple rituals, are another clear example of their readiness to provoke massive geopolitical conflict in service of biblical prophecy, The New Yorker. It's worth noting that fundamentalist evangelical Christians and extremist religious Jews are pursuing the same goal: the destruction of the Dome of the Rock and the rebuilding of the Third Temple, but for very different reasons. The Jewish extremists want the temple rebuilt to restart animal blood sacrifices, a Bronze Age ritual they believe must resume to fulfill Torah commandments. It's a return to primitive theology, one soaked in blood and entirely incompatible with modern ethical frameworks. The evangelicals, on the other hand, couldn't care less about Jewish theology. Their interest in the temple is purely eschatological. They believe it's a necessary step toward the second coming of Christ. What makes this alliance even more grotesque is that evangelicals also believe every Jew who doesn't accept Jesus will burn in hell for eternity. That's not a bug in their system. It's core doctrine. So let's be clear, this is not a friendship. It's not shared values. It's strategic cooperation between two death-driven ideologies, each using the other to bring about their own apocalyptic visions. And the rest of the world is stuck in the middle. This is the theology of death, a theology that prioritizes a mythical afterlife over the lives of the living. That views nuclear war as a purifying fire. That sees millions of human deaths not as a tragedy, but as necessary steps toward the end times. John Hagee's Jerusalem Countdown is a blueprint for this worldview, calling for preemptive strikes on nations like Iran and interpreting every global conflict through a biblical lens. Wikipedia, American Archive. The political reach of groups like Christians United for Israel, CUFI, with millions of members and active lobbying in Congress, ensures this apocalyptic vision translates into real policy. They fight against a two-state solution and push for uncritical U.S. support of Israeli military actions. Send Sam forward. And then there's Donald Trump. The 45th President of the United States catered relentlessly to evangelical zealots. He moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem in 2018, a symbolic act that inflamed tensions across the Middle East and thrilled the end times crowd, BBC. He posed in front of a church holding a Bible upside down after violently clearing peaceful protesters from Lafayette Square and PR, an empty gesture designed solely to appeal to theocratic voters. His alliance with figures like Paula White and his rhetorical nods to divine destiny fueled the fire of evangelical nationalism. And now that he's returned to power, one must ask, would Trump push the button literally or figuratively if his base demanded it? If he believed it would secure loyalty or fulfill his messianic self-image? That's not a rhetorical question. It's a survival question. So no, I'm not being irrational. I'm not being extreme. I'm trying to warn people. Every day we allow this ideology to fester unchallenged in the halls of power, we edge closer to annihilation. If religious extremists in other countries talked openly about nuking Jerusalem to fulfill their prophecy, we'd call them terrorists. When it's an American wearing a cross and a flag pin, we call them faithful and look the other way. That has to end. We must break the camel's back, not with violence, but with truth, with courage, and with relentless public resistance to this toxic, apocalyptic belief system. We must confront the evangelical death cult before their dream of holy fire becomes our collective nightmare. Stop playing patty cake with fanatical religion. Name it, shame it, push it out of power before it's too late.